All right, so time to demo a few more features about pivot tables. First, we forgot to kind of clean this up a little bit. So the description here is now, by grouping them, we made everything into categories. And then this is going to give us a nice report about total products sold. So here is our official final report. One thing that we can do is get a report for each region. So currently, the two regions that we have in our data, Europe and America, they are both being factored into this. So one way that I could get a report for each of them is maybe by adding it into as a filter. So now I just want to filter by, let's just say, America. And if I just want an America report, I could create a new tab and copy, paste special. Maybe I'll just paste values. Maybe I want to keep the formatting. Values and formatting. Good enough. This is a naive way to do this. So imagine that you had 10, 12 different regions, right? That's going to be a painstaking process to repeat this. Right now, select Europe, do the same exact thing, right? That's going to be a long process. So turns out there is a much quicker way to do this. So let's get rid of that filter, but I actually need to add that back in. So when I add in the filter and I go to pivot table analyze at the top here, if I go to options and then one moment. So I need to go to options and then show report filter pages. And then right now my filter is on region. If I click OK on that, what happens is Excel will make a separate tab named for each of the unique values of the filter, and it contains just those reports. So this would be a much more efficient way, especially if you have 10, 20, 30 different unique values of whatever you're filtering on, to get a bunch of different reports of the same format for each of those different values. Another neat feature is we've seen slicers before, is called a timeline, which is a slicer for a date value. So if I insert a timeline, I can filter now based on the specific month, but in a timeline format. So right now it's currently grouped in quarters. So if I am showing just January, right, that's only quarter one. If I'm showing now January to June, that's going to give me through quarter two. So timelines are a neat way to filter on date values specifically. And you can also change the title here with the caption. So maybe I'll change this to sales date. And then you can also have a few different color options, styles as well. So that is timelines. Then for the last features that I'll demonstrate, we'll kind of jump back over to the first report. And let's say that I wanted to use a measure that was actually not in our original data. How can we do that? The way is with calculated fields. So on my pivot table analyze tab, a calculated field allows me to, if I click up here, fields, items, and sets, allows me to create a new measure that isn't originally in the data, but is a function of columns in the data. So maybe I want to change this to sales euros. And right now, the exchange rate is sales USD times 1.15. And okay on that. And that gives me my sales in euros. So that allows us to, again, we have to use the space trick. That allows us to have the sales euros in our field list as well. So I can filter, sort, do whatever I need to based on this calculated field. It's also really easy to edit your formula. So if you go to calculated fields, and from the drop down here, my sales euro, I can edit, maybe the exchange rate changes to 1.17. I can also delete it, or you can also show, if you have multiple of them, list formulas. It will give you all of the different formulas in a new tab. Last feature that I'll show, promise, is that you can figure out from our pivot table, this is of course summarizing the overall data, right? The sales data is being collapsed, summarized by this pivot table. We can figure out which rows are being used to account for Leibniz sales. So if I double click the sales USD, that specific one gives me a new sheet with just the rows that correspond, that go into that row of the pivot table. I can confirm that by highlighting those and looking in the corner here. The sum of all of those sales for LIBOR is 5,800, 58,000. If I look back on my report, there we go. So that is an easy way to check that your pivot table is working correctly and to see which rows are being factored into this row. You can also do it for the first ones as well. You can show more information. If I double click, I can add more information. So let's say I also want to get the customer code. That will add a new column for the customer code, which is essentially similar to just adding the customer code over here. So that is it for the content of this video. So next up, you should work on the exercise. So the first part of the exercise is recreating the company name from the master data and inserting it into the company code using XLOOKUP like we did in the first video. And then we want you to create a report from this description. So read through this description, right? Visualize what it should look like. Think about how you can use a pivot table to get you there, and then work on creating that report to match this description. And I'll see you in the next video.